Good evening, everybody. I'm just taking a break from marking the last few take a risk modules or assignments, and I'll come back to that point in a couple minutes, but just wanted to talk about your upcoming work. So let's have a look. So first of all, oops, not that one. So just to have a look at our dates, I'm marking the Taking and Embracing Risk assignment now. Several of you, there's 4 of you, I think, who have not submitted your work correctly to the assignment. You may have put it in the discussion forum, but it's not in the assignment. So please check. With the exception of 1 or 2 of you who I see just submitted today, if you've not received a grade yet for your assignment, you've not submitted it in the right place. So I'll give you another day. If I get to it tonight, I'll email you. But just check, and if you have submitted it only to the discussion forum, put it in the assignment. Then you're going to be doing the response to take a risk and read through your peers' work. And that's due basically on Friday, so that should be just about done. I'll have a look through those. I won't say much except to see that you've done it, because of course I've just been reading through 40 of your assignments. And then we're quickly on to Module 4. So Module 4 is a discussion forum. The post is due a week from this Friday, so you have quite a bit of time, a whole week, to do some reading, and I'll look at that in a moment. Posts and replies due on the following week. And then your final assignment due on Friday, the 22nd of November. So you actually have over 3 weeks to get to that point. So we're moving along at a good pace. So let's just have a look now at what's coming up. So the take a risk has been done. Yes, if any of you want a mid-course self-assessment or a mid-course conference, one of you at least has emailed me, and I'll set that up over the weekend. If anyone else wants to chat to me, I'm around on the weekend and we can set up a Teams meeting. So let's have a look at Module 4. So the point of Module 4 is that you've now done the first few modules. You've looked at ideas and innovations in curriculum. You've come up with your own framework. You've then tried to implement some part of that framework or some ideas from your framework into your take a risk assignment. Now you've had a chance to look at what your peers have done. Now we're going to look at some other frameworks, so 5 more frameworks through the readings, and see what they have to say about innovation and what they have to say about inclusiveness as well. So these are 2 big key elements. One about innovation, so that speaks to the idea of taking risks in your own teaching, and how do you try out new ideas, and by doing so taking some risks on what you're going to do, and how do you ameliorate or mitigate those risks for your students but make the work innovative and interesting. And then we're also going to be looking at being more inclusive, and this speaks to the idea of passing on some risk or creating opportunities to take a risk for your students. So many of you in your Module 3 assignment, you talked about risks in terms of a perhaps more general idea of how that risk might be handed on to the students, or how they might be taking certain risks by being challenged or so forth. What I like to see, and what I think is a key element of taking a risk, and which ties to being more inclusive, is that often I like to see that those risks that you create for your students are quite explicit, and often they come in the form of some kind of choice. And so that ties into the idea of being inclusive, because if you look at sort of a universal design for learning, or if you're still familiar with the term differentiation, where you have different types of activities set out for your students, or you're using an inquiry approach where students pick their own topic and they may have a say in the way they're being assessed. These types of choices are, in fact, explicit risks that your students will take. So if you give your students a range of topics and say you need to pick a topic, that's an explicit choice, and the choice has some consequences. So if you think of our First People's Principles of Learning, um, one of them is that learning involves understanding the consequences of our actions. So we don't view consequences as a negative thing or a negative result. Consequences are simply the results of our choices. So if we make good choices, we'll make good consequences. So this to me really speaks to the idea of critical thinking, and it's very inclusive because it puts a lot of power and control into the hands of the students. And so teachers often find or think they are the ones that need to include their students. But one way to do that is by giving students greater choice to make choices that are suitable for them. And so that's another way, and I think a very appropriate way, that we be very inclusive by allowing students those choices, and then they get to live with the consequences of those choices and learn from understanding the consequences of their actions, the consequences of their choices. So I think it ties very nicely together in a very inclusive activity that speaks to your whole class. So you're going to do that. This is going to help tie in the work that you've done with your own framework. You're sort of revisiting that framework, but now viewing it in light of these new readings around innovation and inclusion. You'll have 2 weeks almost to do that. While you're doing that, you should really be thinking about your final project. And the final project then, here it goes. The final project then is to inspire innovation in your colleagues. So there's a bit of reading there. What does an effective learning presentation look like? Designing a professional learning opportunity. So some good reading there for you to think about the mode or the modality, the medium or media that you'll use to design this learning opportunity. But what you're going to do is create a presentation. It says presentation tool, but what we want is a presentation, not just the tool, but the presentation as well, that will inspire your colleagues to be innovative in their own curriculum planning. And so that can take many shapes. And one of the choices that we are giving you now is you need to decide how you're going to do that. So you're making a choice, and that's an explicit risk that you're going to be taking in this assignment. And as I said to many of you, if there's no consequence to your choice, or if there's no consequence to your action, then in terms of our First People's Principles of Learning, if there's no consequence to the action, is there any learning? And we might argue that not as much as there could be. So there's some ideas of how you might do that. But ultimately what you're going to do is design something for your colleagues in your context to get them to, or to inspire them to work with you, or to adopt something, or to just be more innovative and inclusive in their own work. Think about who your audience is. Share things you've learned in this course, and how are you going to share them? What's the best way? What's the best presentation format for your audience? So there's a link there. Don't do a presentation format because you like it, but because it's going to speak to or be accessible to your audience. And on that note, the best presentation is one that will stand more or less alone, because you might not be there to present it. Now, ideally, if you were doing this as a presentation at a lunch hour workshop, then everyone would be there to watch you and you would walk them through it. But imagine then someone didn't come and you gave them the presentation, would they still be able to see your ideas? And I kind of like that idea. A good presentation is one that you could talk to, but is able to stand on its own if you were to put it on your portfolio or on a SharePoint site or something of that nature. Then you're going to do a rationale. You're not rationalizing the content of your presentation. We don't need to convince people the value of critical thinking, as it says here. what we want you to do is rationalize why you feel that the way you've presented your work to your colleagues will in fact inspire them. And so therein lies another risk for you. I want you to really think about the risks, and another word for risk is choice. What choices have you given to your colleagues? And what are the consequences of those choices, so they can apply some critical thinking and determine for themselves, well, what are the consequences for me of what I've done, and how do I then allow my students to make choices, and how do I be more inclusive and attract or engage more of my students by allowing my students to make their own informed choices about their own work. So I think that applies equally to a grade 1 teacher, to an art teacher, to someone who's working in a career center, to high school teachers, to several of you who are teaching in higher education or in a vocational or bachelor level course. So that's quite a bit of talking. I'm way over my normal limit of 6 or 7 minutes, so I'm going to leave it there. Good luck. I'll try to share another video as we get closer, and certainly email me if you have any questions at all. Okay, thank you so much.